Good morning, Paulina.
Good morning, Lars.
Friday morning in the studio, back again.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, what's going on?
Honestly, I'm a little bit shocked right now because I've just had breakfast with my husband.
Are
And
you shocked because you have breakfast?
no. But I mean, I usually don't eat breakfast this early. So, and that had the side effect that I had breakfast together with my husband because usually I don't have breakfast with my husband because I eat so much later. And then he told me the most insane story I've heard for months. And I mean, we've heard a lot of insane stories, right? But so we have this moderator, TV moderator in Germany. She's quite popular. She's also written children's books and she's quite well known. And for at least 5 years, I think, she has been trying to figure out who was putting deepfake porno movies of her all over the internet. And apparently yesterday evening or this morning, it was publicized that she discovered that the person who did this was her own freaking husband.
No.
Yes.
What the F is going on?
Yes. I mean, how much? Tell me how much you hate your wife without telling me you hate your wife.
But why? Any like explanations as to why?
Nope. I mean, the story just broke, right? So I obviously also didn't have any time to do my research or my due diligence on the story. But it's just woof.
That is insane.
Yes. I mean, they have kids together. They are living together. It's not her ex-husband. It's her current husband, the father of her children.
Whoa. Like you can't like really comprehend how it would be to like wake up and find that out and like how are we going to proceed from here, right?
How are you ever going to trust another man in your entire life? I have no idea. I mean, my husband and I, we also just watched this Netflix documentary Inside the Manosphere yesterday.
Oh no, don't get me started on that one. Oh my God.
I had to stop after half an hour. I was so angry. I was so effing angry. So those two things just collided yesterday and this morning, and I'm like, my hatred.
Okay, so I have to ask you, Paulina, you said you had to stop after half an hour, right?
Yes.
So did you finish it?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
Please do. It gets worse.
Yeah, I can't.
They are gonna go down the deepest rabbit hole of juice and something in the water.
But they have millions.
I can't really find words for it.
Millions of followers for this nonsense.
Yes.
Millions.
Yes.
And I mean, this idea that you have to, as a man, you have to create your own value in the world by building up riches and la-di-la-di-la. Because otherwise you're not male or not masculine enough. I'm so angry. I'm so angry.
I can just say that out there, like to kind of prove them wrong. My girlfriend's ex-boyfriend, he was a freaking multi-millionaire, like insanely rich. She hates him. He was a narcissist. He was not kind to her and so on. And she also keeps saying to me, it's like, I am so glad I found a normal person. I don't care how much you make. And to be honest, I know that I'm an entrepreneur, but I haven't broken through yet. I'm not worth the chair I'm sitting on. Right? So
And I know that your girlfriend and I fully agree on this, and as well on what makes a man a good man and a
Yes.
man worth spending your time on. Has nothing to
Yes.
do with his bank account. It has nothing to do with his masculinity. It has more to do with the fact, can he be vulnerable? Can he be open? Can
Mm-hmm.
he actually listen? Can he be there for me? Can he? So in a way, yes, can he protect me, but not in this macho alpha thing, but rather in this, is he capable of actually showing up for me in a deep emotional sense of the word?
And trust me, these men, they can't do that.
Because they are not men. They are
Not exactly.
narcissistic kids,
They are
honestly.
monkeys without the fur coat.
Yeah. So no, I will most likely not continue watching this. I actually
Oh,
switched
please, no, please
into
do, please
meditation after
do.
that. No, no,
No,
no.
please do, because it actually gets really good at the end.
Okay, I'll see. But I'll have to space
Yes.
it out. I'll have to take at least 3 to 4 evenings to, because I can only see this in small doses. I can't. Jesus.
Okay, Paulina,
That's
let's
an
get
entire
into today's
podcast on
recording.
its. That's actually an entire podcast on its own.
Oh yes, are we ready to record?
Yes, we are.
Okay, let's do this. Hello, everybody, and welcome to
Cultures from Hell.
My name is Lars, and today we are diving for the second time into the KPI trap when metrics replace meaning. So you're listening to episode 47, I think it is. Yes, 47. If you haven't heard 46 yet, then please pause, go back, and then come back again into this one. With me, as always, to unravel this like insanely interesting and very deep topic is my co-host, Paulina, co-founder of the Culture Code Foundation and our culture experts. Okay, Paulina. So we are continuing from last week, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just really briefly, try to kind of sum up, if you can remember. I don't know if you can remember, but try to remember like we talked about last week, or what is the KPI trap?
Yes. So what we were talking about was at the end of the day that companies that track KPIs and numbers just for the sake of tracking numbers and not actually looking behind what the numbers are telling us, and completely forget about the people who are driving the numbers, that those are basically caught in this KPI trap, and that this is a very, very good sign for cultural rot and personal disengagement of your employees, because they will only try to reach any number for the sake of reaching the number, and nobody is really understanding what's underneath and what you might need to do in order to change the course of things.
Yeah. And in last episode, and again for everybody, please go back and listen to that one first. You mentioned passive disengagement. What does that look like inside a company, like on a day-to-day basis?
Actually, what makes it so dangerous is that it doesn't look like anything. Right? So it looks like people showing up on time. It looks like reports getting submitted on time. It looks like meetings where everyone has their camera on and nobody says anything surprising. It looks like performance reviews where the boxes get ticked and nothing real gets discussed. So you have to look a little bit closer, a little bit deeper, because passive disengagement is the employee who used to come to you with ideas and doesn't do that anymore. It looks like the sales representative who hits exactly 100% of quota every quarter, not 102, not 898, not always squarely 100, just enough, right? And yes, I am fully aware that many companies will now say, well, that would be amazing. Sales reps hitting exactly 100% quota every quarter. But it's about not going further, right? And most companies that we know also have a special bonus if you overachieve. So, and those are the cases that I'm referring to, right? It also looks like the manager who stopped pushing back on decisions they disagree with, not because they've been convinced of your viewpoint, but because they've learned that pushing back doesn't change anything. And it's incredibly hard to measure because by definition, what's absent doesn't show up in your metrics, right? And it's actually something that I see so much with my clients, especially the clients where we train the leaders. When you have a bunch of leaders sitting in front of you saying, yeah, that's all good and well what you're trying to teach us here, but as long as you're not coaching our C-level and they are also not doing exactly what you're telling us now, we're not going to change anything because it doesn't make any sense, right? So that is also a huge thing of passive disengagement. If your leaders want to change things for the better, but they feel they are fighting a lost battle.
And how can culture like look high performing on paper while people are psychologically checking out?
I think the best way of approaching this is by telling you about a company that I worked with. And this is one of those cases where I think now, if I hadn't been in the room at the time, I wouldn't believe the story myself. So we're talking about a mid-sized company, solid revenue, professional management team, genuinely not a bad place to work for on the surface. And they had a very sophisticated KPI framework. Every team had their metrics, everything was tracked. I'm talking dashboards for literally anything. But here's what nobody in leadership noticed. Different teams were operating under completely different conditions. Different market regions, different product maturity, different customer bases. And yet every team was being measured against the same targets in the same way with the same benchmarks. And you, more than most people, because you've worked so many different markets across the globe, you know that this doesn't work. Right? Because you have to take the individualistic situation in different countries into consideration, especially if you have a different product maturity. And the effect was brutal. Not because anyone was malicious, but because the system was blind. The teams in harder conditions were constantly underperforming on paper. They were constantly under scrutiny for what was going on. They were working just as hard, sometimes even harder, but the numbers didn't reflect that. And because they didn't achieve the numbers on paper, management then also decided to reduce funds for that team, right? So they didn't get as much marketing budget. They didn't get as much product budget in order to develop features that were relevant for that specific market. And nobody was stopping to ask, wait, are we measuring this fairly? And instead, the response was just simply more pressure, more tracking, more KPI check-ins, more layoffs, because they were convinced, okay, we have to let go of the sales representatives, we have to let go of the account executives, we have to let go of the team leads, all of that, right? So they kept rotating people in the wrong system. And as you can imagine, the people in the teams with the more difficult market conditions stopped bringing their full selves to work. They stopped proposing initiatives. They stopped fighting for product features. They stopped flagging risks. Why stick out your neck in a system that's already decided that you're underperforming? Because they would judge all of your risk flagging or all of your initiatives as excuses for not reaching quota. So all of the sales representatives there showed up, they did the job, and they mentally left the building at the latest at 5 o'clock, right? On paper, they were staffed, they were compliant, they were present. And in reality, they had just checked out. And the management...
And then what?
And the management had no freaking idea, because they were just focused on the dashboards.
Yeah, and they look good, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously not for the harder regions, right? They didn't show up full of green, but they were looking good.
Let me just, again, like you just said, I've worked with different markets, and let me just kind of give an example to everybody listening out there if they haven't been in sales, and how two markets that might on paper look the same but is very different. So I have worked, like I live in Copenhagen in Denmark. I've worked, of course, a lot with the Scandinavian market, but I've also worked with the US market. And when
the UK market. And you've also worked with
the UK market. I've worked with different, but for my example here, it's the US versus the Nordics.
Yeah.
And again, like on paper, it seems like hey, it's the same culture, same mentality, blah blah blah. But the big difference is that if you work for a US company in the Danish market, they want you to kind of like go after the C-level for like the decision makers, and these are the ones we want to target. Yeah. This is the one you need to talk to, and so on. But what they don't understand is that in Denmark, or Scandinavia in general, we have an extremely flat culture, and a lot of leaders actually put that responsibility of testing new stuff, looking into new software solutions, whatever, they actually put that into the hands of an everyday Joe, in lack of better explanation of the person, right? Mm-hmm. So that person actually have a lot of saying, because the leader will go to that person and say, like, so you're the one who's been testing this out. Can you give the thumbs up for it or the thumbs down for it? Mm-hmm. So it's the leader that's not actually taking that decision. But in the US, you have like a very strong hierarchy, and it is the leader. You have to go after the leader.
Yeah.
But in I would actually say in Scandinavia, it's actually more the rule than the exception, that you don't go after the leaders. You have to find the champion in the company. And that's kind of a big difference.
Yeah.
Even though that I know a lot of US companies that, like, if they want to go into the Scandinavian markets, they're like, oh, but Scandinavians, they're our friends. It's the same, we have the same culture. We all drink Coca-Cola. We all watch, I was about to say MTV. We don't do that anymore.
It is not the same culture. And I mean, your example is so brilliant. And there are so many other examples like that, right? So for example, in the when we both worked in software sales, we won so many deals with the company that we were working in together, because we were one of the very few AI companies that hosted exclusively in Germany and didn't have server hosting in the US, because we understood that hosting in Germany is incredibly important for German customers buying software in Germany. So other companies that I work with or work for, they decided, nah, that's not important. It's not important. And they wouldn't see the same level of traction, not because the software was any worse, but simply because of the hosting issues, or because, and also because we didn't necessarily build the right features for the German market that were necessary to rebuild or work with the processes that were different in one country than they were in another. So if you're focused on what is important for one market and don't take into consideration that the markets are vastly different, you're cutting yourself off at the knees. And especially you're cutting off your salespeople at the knees.
100%.
And if you
So let's continue, Paulina. So what kind of behaviors show up when employees like starts to feel reduced to output?
my initial thought here was, do you remember the episode we recorded with Bilal about AI culture, where engineers tend to get reduced to output? And I thought he painted such a vivid picture of how people feel or what behaviors show up when employees feel reduced to output, right? So he mentioned that the judgment disappears first, and then the creativity disappears, and then the courage to experiment or to speak up or whatever, right? He mentioned those three things, and I think this is a very succinct answer to your question. And those, not coincidentally, are the three things you most need to build a sustainably high-performance culture. Judgment is the ability to make good decisions in ambiguous situations. Creativity is the ability to find solutions that aren't already in the playbook. And courage is the willingness to say this isn't right when everyone else is nodding, and to thereby identify blind spots. And metric-heavy cultures train people actively out of all of those three abilities, because judgment requires context, not just numbers. And creativity requires psychological safety to fail. And courage requires the belief that the organization actually wants the truth, not just the target. And when you train this out of your people, what you get instead is compliance. People who do exactly what they're measured on and nothing else. And then you've basically spent years and millions of euros building a machine that's optimized to do the minimum necessary to hit a number. That's not high performance. That's expensive mediocrity.
So you're so right. How do you spot like the difference between like in engagement and obedient productivity?
Are you asking me, or I think you're asking me if I'm being a leader, how I could spot that, right?
Yes, yeah, sure, yeah. Like you've been a leader in multiple teams. Like, so how would you spot that?
So you can ask a simple question in a team meeting, and that is, what are we getting wrong right now? What are the things that I am missing? Right? And either both questions or either one of them. An engaged team will have answers, specific answers. They will tell you exactly where the friction is, what's not working, what the customer is actually experiencing versus what the dashboard is saying. It might be uncomfortable, and that's exactly how you know it's real. An obedient team will hesitate. They might look at each other. They'll definitely give you safe answers. Like, things are going pretty well. We just need to improve X. And X will be something that's already on the improvement list. Nothing new. Nothing that could get anyone in trouble. I think you've heard me saying this before a myriad of times. The worst behavior you accept becomes the norm. And one of the most corrosive behaviors you can normalize is silence in the face of problems. And once people learn that flagging reality gets them penalized and hitting the numbers no matter what gets them rewarded, they will hit the number and keep the reality to themselves every single time.
And both you and I, we have experienced, I would actually say both.
Yes.
Several times, like in teams, right? And for me, I would say, like, again, I don't want to come off as an expert. That's a reason why you're the expert on in the podcast. But I would say, like, when I come into a meeting, I 2 times in my career has been like responsible for a team, but I've like been part of a team multiple times. And when you come into these like normal sales meeting every Monday morning or Friday morning or whenever it is, and if you're the new one, you immediately feels which one is it, like one or the other, right? You can feel that immediately when you come into the room and people start talking and how they respond to the leader. And I would actually say you can actually also hear it on the leader's first question. What kind of questions are they asking everybody when they come in, right?
That is a really good point. Maybe you can add that here to the list. What questions do you think would expose? So, I'm turning it around. I'm asking you a question.
Exactly.
What questions do you think would expose such a situation by which leader question?
So you're asking me what questions. I would say, like, a bad leader will come in and the first thing they'll say, like, okay, did we hit our targets this week?
Yeah.
That's like obvious.
How do the numbers look?
Yes. And I think I can't remember if I told you on the podcast or off the podcast last week or the week before about this leader that came in, and the first thing he did was opening up the spreadsheet, right?
I think you mentioned it on the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So he was opening up the spreadsheet, and it was obvious who didn't hit numbers and who did, right? Yeah. And instead of like looking into like how can we help the ones that didn't do it, or how can we all like pitch in here, or how can we all as a team hit the numbers together? He was actually like downsizing. So let's say we go into a meeting, you're hitting your numbers, I'm not. The way he would frame that is actually, maybe Lars, you should sit in on some of Paulina's calls. And I was like, yeah. Like, fuck. Yeah. Okay, Paulina, shake it off. I think we have taken this approach like many times on the podcast about like a myth about what the topics we're talking about. And again, like, you have been a leader yourself, you are working professionally with company culture and so on. So what's a popular myth about KPIs and performance culture you would love to like challenge here in the podcast?
I think everything I've said so far points to that direction. And let me just put it into one single sentence here. More KPIs do not mean more accountability. That, from my perspective, that viewpoint is completely backwards, right? So the viewpoint that more KPIs mean more accountability. When you give people 7 critical KPIs, they'll pick the 2 or 3 they can most easily influence and quietly deprioritize the rest. When you give them 20, they'll pick 1 and the rest becomes noise. And that's also one of the reasons why in our work, we actually teach our clients to choose 5 to maximum 7 vital KPIs per team. Maximum 7. But usually we say 3 to 5. Not because it's a nice round number, but because beyond that, human attention just doesn't match the issue anymore, or it doesn't scale anymore. You don't get more accountability. You get the fusion of accountability. You get the fusion of focus which is basically as having none.
Which makes so good sense. And if
And to be honest, in most teams, there is no reason to track more. There is no reason. You have just to look at what are the most important ones, which actually move the needle, which actually have an impact on driving your business forward.
And you see sometimes, I'm very active on LinkedIn, and you see so many people like posting pictures of like these huge dashboards on the wall and so on. And to be honest, when you come, I remember this company called Minuba in Denmark, and shout out to Minuba, great products. I know the owner, so it's not to put them down. But I remember the first time I came into their office, selling them software. I came in, and the first thing you're met by is, of course, as a startup, you have the glowing neon sign. That's what everybody has. But then you have like this insanely TV with like dashboards and numbers and countries and pins and bim, and red and yellow and green and so on. And it looks impressive. I must admit, when you come in, you see it like, whoa, like again, you don't understand what's going on, but it just looks impressive. But it doesn't make it right.
Nope.
No. So if you want it, have it in your like entry points where everybody comes in if you want to impress, but don't shove it in the face of your employees.
I mean, I am a big fan of having KPIs visibly displayed.
Yeah.
So that everyone at every turn or at every once a day at least can actually see where we're at. I'm a big fan of that. But again, focused on those KPIs that really matter. And also maybe not as the very first thing you see when you enter the business.
Yeah. Paulina, if a leader wanted to kind of accidentally create a culture, like, and I'm going to put that in quotation mark, accidentally create a culture of moral numbness, what would they do? So like, let's turn it around.
The first thing I'm going to mention is something that most companies actually do, especially in sales. Tie bonuses exclusively to individual KPIs with no team component. Because the moment I'm rewarded only for my own number, I stop caring about yours. And I definitely stop caring about the customer if the customer isn't in my metric. Remember my story about the one AE I used to work with who just would close the deals with no regards whether to whatever was important to the customer, just to close the right amount of deals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, never discuss the story behind the numbers. Just show the dashboard, mark the red ones, expect improvement, move on. No context, no questions, no humanity, just color codes. Love that one. And thirdly, reward the person who hits the target regardless of how they hit it. Again, back to my story about this 180. Because with that, what you're telling everyone else in the room is the method doesn't matter. The sustainability doesn't matter. The quality doesn't matter. The number is everything that counts. And once that message lands, you have lost the ethical rubber of your organization. And this is not hypothetical. I've seen all three in real companies. And as you can imagine, by me adding the story twice to this segment, sometimes you can even see all of them in the same company.
Yes, 100%. And for people like just listening to the podcast and not watching on video, they can't see that I was laughing just a second ago. And it was because when you read up like the second point, I already forgot the question. Like I forget things so easily. I forgot the question. And when you read the second one, I was like still sitting there thinking, you can't mean that. That's not the way to do it. But then I remember, like, okay, we turned the question around. I was like, okay, because I was like, come on, Paulina, I have so much respect for you, and you're saying that. Oh
Lars,
my God. Okay.
maybe you should drink a little bit more coffee now.
Yes, more coffee, please. Okay. What are you personally most alert to now when you look at performance systems? Again, I would imagine like you're deep diving into a lot of things when it comes to competence and culture, right? But what are you personally most alert to now when looking at performance systems?
Hands down, whether there is a human-centered KPI at the company level. Not a soft culture initiative buried in an HR deck, an actual vital KPI that leadership is measured on in the same way they are measured on revenue. That can be employee net promoter score, that can be a culture score, that can be retention in key roles, that can be percentage of voluntary leavers. Something that makes the health of the people as non-negotiable as the health of the balance sheet. Very, very many companies don't have this. And the ones that don't are essentially telling the organization through their choices, people matter, but not as a primary metric. They're a cost input. And people notice that. They always notice it. When it comes to KPIs, you're saying you focus on what you measure. And if you don't measure any human-centered KPI at the company level, then you will not put the people front and center of what you're doing and what you're deciding. And there are actually very, very successful investment companies that are making this part of their contracts with the companies that they are funding. That if you don't, actually I only know from one investment company, but they are very, very successful. They are invested in huge, wildly successful companies. And it's part of the contracts, of the funding contracts, to measure and track at least one human-centered KPI at the company level, which shows you it's not just me as a soft culture expert who understands the reality and the importance of that, but even hard, finance-focused, venture capital funding companies have understood that this is crucial.
What kind of human qualities tend to disappear first when metrics replace meaning?
I would say curiosity. It's the first thing to go, and it's the one that hurts most in the long term. Because curious people ask why questions. Why is this metric moving or not moving? Why did this customer churn? Why is this term underperforming compared to that one? And why questions are inconvenient in a metric-heavy culture because they might reveal that the metric itself is the problem. And so in those kind of cultures, curiosity gets quietly punished. Not explicitly, right? No, so nobody's going to say, stop asking why or stop asking questions. But the person who asks why in a culture that just wants the number hits tends to slow things down, tends to create more work, tends to make the leadership feel questioned themselves. And so they stop. And with them goes the organization's ability to actually learn anything from its own data.
So we have talked about like that metrics itself is not or are not the enemy here. So What does healthy use of metrics look like?
Healthy measurement is when the number serves the conversation instead of replacing it. In practicality, that means a few things. First, you have a small number of truly vital KPIs. Right? I mentioned that before. 3 to 5, 7 maximum. Not 23 metrics in a spreadsheet that nobody actually reads. The vital few, tracked consistently, and then discussed openly. Second, you distinguish between leading and lagging indicators. So leading KPIs tell you where you're going, what activities are driving future results. Lagging KPIs, on the other hand, tell you where you've been. Most companies obsess over lagging KPIs and then wonder why they are always reacting instead of anticipating. If you only measure outputs, you cannot actually steer. You can only report the crash. And the third one is a non-negotiable in my work. And that's the one that I've mentioned before, right? At least one of your vital company level KPIs needs to be human-centered. Something that treats organizational health as a real business metric, not a nice to have. The strongest companies I see actually also incentivize. So leaders are not only measured based on this KPI, but their bonuses are tied to that KPI just as much as it's tied to any other business KPIs.
And then what questions should sit next to every of these KPIs on a dashboard?
So I'm not sure if the questions actually need to be on the dashboard, but if you're discussing KPIs, right, no matter the round, if you're discussing it in management, if you're discussing it as a team lead with your team members, or with your peers, so all leaders together, the first question should be, what's the story behind this number? So I don't want to know just the number. I want to know the context. I want to know the conditions. I want to know the factors that the number cannot capture on its own. The second question is, who is affected by this number, and are they in this room? If the people impacted by this metric have no voice in interpreting it, you are flying blind. And thirdly, what decision does this number actually change? That's a really important one. Because if the answer is none, if you'd be making the same decision regardless of the number, basically, you don't really need to measure the number at all. So this is like, that can also help you to weed out which KPIs you can stop measuring.
100%. And to any leader listening to this podcast out there, put a pin in here, because I think that's three things that they should really take in and remember. Back to the sales meeting, and again, our background is in sales, but this goes for HR, this goes for customer support, this goes for development, it goes for everything, right?
Yes.
But from sales, at least, with our experience, put a pin in those three things, please, and listen to it again and again, beat the shit out of it. I'm cursing on my own podcast until you get it under your skin.
The beautiful thing is you can just write those questions down into your agenda for your KPI meetings.
Yes.
And then you don't even have to remember it. Just write it down into your recurring agenda and you're done with it.
As easy as that.
Yeah.
If a leadership team wants to pressure test its KPI culture, like let's say tomorrow, where should it start?
Start with one conversation. Just one. Bring your leadership team together and ask them which of our KPIs is driving behaviors we don't actually want. I can assure you that every team has one. The customer service team that resolves tickets fast but doesn't actually solve the problems behind it. The sales team that hits revenue targets by promising things that they can't deliver. The HR team that fills positions quickly but not well. Everyone knows, nobody says it. And maybe they don't know immediately. Maybe they need to think about it, but they will come up with ideas. And that conversation, if you can actually have it honestly, will tell you more about your culture than any engagement survey. And just a side note, if you can actually have it honestly, obviously requires psychological safety and a lot of trust from your people. So if you don't have that, invest in that part first.
And I remember I talked to a customer support team at some point, and again, like, of course, one of the metrics they measure on is how fast do we resolve tickets, right? Or how many do we resolve, and so on and so on. But the beauty of this, that they had, like, the top metric was always the NPS score. So you couldn't measure one metric or KPI without tying it into the NPS score. So that means, like, if they said, like, oh, great, it's green, we are closing tickets 100% faster than last week, they had to tie it to the NPS score and say, like, but what is the progress on the NPS score? If that was lower, then it was not green over here, right? And the same thing, like, again, we are closing twice as many, or we are using AI to solve it, and so on. So everything had to be tied to the NPS. So if the NPS was not at minimum the same level, then it was not a success, no matter if this one was red or green. But it also went the other way. Like, even though that the number might be red, but then if the NPS was going up, then red would actually be a good thing. So then tied everything into the NPS, and I like that approach.
Yeah, it's a good approach. I haven't heard of that yet, but I like it.
Yeah, that's free for you to put into the Culture Code Foundation.
Appreciate that.
Okay, Paulina. 3 warning signs. What are 3 warning signs? And I'm putting up 5 fingers. 3 now. What are 3 warning signs that a company is drifting from meaning toward metric worship? And you're drinking now.
So, I had so much time to drink, and now that's the moment I choose to take as it from a huge ass glass here. So first of all, first warning sign would be that the discussions and meetings are about the number, not the reality behind it. People are, in most cases, explaining KPIs instead of understanding them. The second warning sign is that the people closest to the customer or the work have stopped surfacing problems. Silence at the front line is always a huge warning sign. And the third one is that if nobody can answer the question, why does this metric matter to us as a company? They can tell you the target, they can't tell you why you're measuring it or why it's important to measure it. And here again, the worst behavior you accept becomes the norm, and that includes the acceptance of meaningless metrics.
And if someone is listening right here, right now, and they kind of feels trapped inside a metrics-only culture, how can they push back constructively?
Definitely don't push back on the metrics. Push back through questions. That's the number. Let's talk about what's driving it. That's not necessarily threatening. That's curious. You can also go asking questions like, I want to make sure I understand this. What's the decision we're trying to make based on this KPI? Again, not threatening, just thoughtful, just curious. The goal is to make it normal to ask the story behind the number. Because once that becomes normal, once curiosity is invited back into the room, the culture slowly starts to shift. And obviously, if you are a team lead, this is easier to do than when you're an IC, because you have a bigger circle of influence. But even as an individual contributor, you can always start asking questions like that. And if you're a leader listening to us today, the single most powerful signal you can send is to be the one asking those questions yourself, because your team watches everything you do. You walk the talk or you don't. And they will notice either way, and they will copy you either way.
What's the biggest thing you hope listeners rethink after this conversation?
That measurement and meaning are not opposites. You can have both. In fact, you need both. Data without meaning is just noise that justifies decisions you've already made. And meaning without data can drift into self-deception. The question, therefore, is not should we measure things? The question has to be, are our metrics helping us see reality more clearly, or are they giving us permission to stop looking at it? Maybe that question should be on the wall of every leadership team meeting room, right next to the dashboard. Maybe that.
Yeah, that's going to be the neon sign next to the dashboard.
Yeah.
Okay, Paulina, we are getting to like the end or the closing of our second episode again. Like everybody, if you're listening, I would say pause and go back and listen to the other one, but it doesn't make sense because we are getting to the end of this one. So when you're finished with this one, go back and listen to the previous episodes. But before we leave, what's one cultural red flag people normalize for too long because it still looks productive from the outside?
Yeah. Definitely the team that never disagrees. High performing, potentially even, definitely polished, always aligned, always on message. From the outside, that looks very cohesive and very strong. From the inside, it means that nobody feels safe enough to say what's actually true. You need the constructive conflict within sustainably high performing teams. And a team that can't tell itself the truth, that can't face the truths that they need to face, they also cannot adapt, they cannot learn, and cannot actually perform in the long term. It can, however, maintain the appearance of doing it, of performing. And that one takes a long time to unravel. And by the time it does, a lot of damage has already been done quietly. In every meeting where someone had something real to say that would have improved outcomes, that would have improved processes, that would have figured out what numbers are driving and what they are not driving, and when they chose not to do so.
And leaving our listeners with that before we round off, please, if they want to reach out to you or they have questions, they want to appear on the show, or they want to dive deeper into the topic we talked about today, where can they find you? Where can they find me? How do they get in contact with us?
Thanks for bringing up all the different options why people could reach out to us.
Yes.
And I want to reiterate on that. Yes, please reach out to us. We would love to have you on the show, either live or re-narrate your stories. And obviously, if you're working for a company or you know a company that could also use some support when it comes to their culture or the leadership, also feel free to reach out. And you can find both Lars and myself on LinkedIn and on Instagram. And you can also find the Culture Code Foundation itself on Instagram. As always, we'll put all of the links, social media handles, and the links in the show notes. to make it as
When
comfortable as
can
possible.
when can they start finding us TikTok, Paulina? I think we need to get on TikTok. We are the audience for TikTok.
I mean, they can find you already there.
Yes.
I'm just refusing to go on there because
And honestly, I would say we're not going on TikTok. It is like what do you call it? Like it's the so me for keyboard warriors that want to get all their anger out. Like I get like the most insane comments. Like what's wrong with this guy's voice and stuff like that. It's like what?
okay.
Like why is that a topic? You know.
For the life of me, I cannot tell you.
No, I have the voice. I can't even tell you that. Okay, Paulina, as always, a huge pleasure. And for everybody listening out there, tune in next week or to next episode, whenever you're listening to it. I will see you next week.
Yes. Thank you all. And thank you, Lars.